So let's start the next session. So let's welcome Mr. Lee.
So 5 days summer school is probably very tiring. So I'm trying to get something new and different. Okay, the generative universal network again is in machine learning societies. It's also kind of a new topic. Let me first talk about the basic concept of it first. It's called generative universal network. Okay, see, this is a new topic, but it has been here for several years. This inventor called Goodfellow, and probably in 中文的话就是好人 his name 就是一个好人。Okay. He has contributed on this, and last year was at NIPS 2016. You probably heard about it in a twin. He's a very criticized person, and usually not have a, kind of a conservative on the positive comments to others' work. And he said GAN is the most important work in the past 5 to 10 years in machine learning society. So you can see how important it is. And this shows all different types of the GANs and the application of the GANs in past 2 years. I can show you several examples. Okay, this example published in 2015. Okay, using machine learning algorithms and systems as generated images of bedrooms. Okay, you might not be able to see this very clearly, but just to have a glance, and it all looks like bedrooms, right? For different styles, different countries, different color background, and so on and so forth. But essentially, if you look into this, look into the details of these images, some of them are not perfect. But those images actually can fool machine learning systems. For instance, if you design a train network for ImageNet, and you supply those bedroom scene images through your, neural network stream for ImageNet, it's high possibility to recognize this as bedrooms. Okay. This is for image generation and manipulations. You can also use to generate videos or predict what's going on in the following scenes. This is the examples. As obviously you can see, this is basketball games. Essentially, with the a series of video, and the system can predict what might have happened. For example, if you compare the predictions with the real true scenarios, okay, and with the details, you can say even they are not exactly the same. The trends are very similar. Well, you might have heard about the text generations, okay? The latest paper, 2017, shows using GAN systems, they can write Chinese poem, they can create Obama political speech, okay, they can generate the musics. Okay. So we always say, okay, speech, literature's music is where human being are creative, right? It might not be true in the future. And I think very recently, last week, or I think 1 or 10 days ago, there was a news about the Facebook. They used the GAN systems in 2 machines, or 2 sets of machines, and talk to each other. They studying some new language, at least the newest thing this, right? I received many messages because that day I was on a flight to Taiwan, and when I arrived, I received tons of messages and asking, do you think this is truly intelligence? Well, I still feel this is far from the truly intelligence, because the system doesn't define the horizontal premise. It doesn't, you say they have interface between the two systems, communications between two systems, but is there any meanings? It's hard to tell. Okay, but the GAN system does show the potentials of real intelligence in the future. Well, this is also an example I really like. So, for example, on the left side is original pictures. We can crop the pictures on purpose and use the GAN system to fill up the missing part. Okay, many of them look quite good. Of course, some of them are not very perfect, right? Well, it can be used for the crime scene investigations. For example, the videos on the street, or they might not, record the face completely, and this will be helped to recover or guess some information and so on and so forth. So let's talk about then what's GAN. The Generative Universal Network GAN is using two DNNs. Okay, one DNN we call the generator. Okay, we inject noises, and generators is an unsupervised neural networks. The goal of this to generate some samples. Okay, those pick the samples. If it can pass through the discriminator and taken as the classification requirement for the recognition report, we say it's achieved the goal of the generation. Well, discriminator is supervised systems. It's used real samples and generate samples to do the trainings. Okay, that's why the two systems kind of interacted to each other's and created, I don't know how to define that, maybe new things and predictable results. So for such kind of GAN systems, again, my background is hardware. Besides those very interesting applications, I'm more concerned about that to realize the GAN systems. Okay, what requirement on the hardware levels. First of all, it's kind of a duplicated, not duplicated, two set of DNNs, supervised and supervised. So definitely the requirement on the computation increases. Definitely the requirement on the memory storage increases. And definitely the communication between the two systems is quite extensive. So how do we handle all these problems is something we're trying to target. So for this work, we call the ReGAN. We try to use ReGAN-based hardware acceleration implementation to realize GAN systems. So I already talked about this many times, so I can skip this page. So let's talk about, I consider myself. So let's talk about the hardware development over here. The descriptive CNNs, essentially majority part is convolution operations. So for convolution operations, it's multiplication and additions. So then we kind of moving the feature maps to do the convolution and addition, multiplication and addition, and so on and so forth. Such kind of structures, if you refer our FPGA paper on high layer, Professor Chen probably mentioned that on Tuesday. It can, if you reorganize the array structures, you can map to RM crossbars. So on RM crossbars, the weight matrix dimension is W times H to represent the whole image over here, and x-axis dimension is equal to k-square, the feature map size. For fractional structure CNNs, it can also be mapped onto crossbar arrays, because one assumption is that since computation on RM is so fast and less small cost, we actually can extend using more hardware resources for it. So for fractional structured CNNs, we can first add zeros between each input and padding that and enlarge this, right? And then the entire operation becomes the convolution operation. So this can also be mapped to the RM crossbar arrays. Okay. Well, the training in GAN system is very interesting, and this will be something I want to introduce today. Okay. Let's say we have generator and the discriminator. Okay. To training the discriminators, we supply real samples. Okay, the real samples, if we're looking at its latencies, it has to go through all the layers of the network in the discriminators. So assume LD is kind of used to represent the layers of discriminators. Okay, so this is represent the latency through this path. It's go through the loss function, the count as 1 over here, and use the output of the loss functions to calculate the delta W and the delta B for the discriminators. So I have to go through this path again. So this is how I calculate the latency. We also need to feed the generator sample through the generator and then through the discriminators. So this entire blue path takes LG, LD1, and LD. Okay? And then go through the two sets of the data, we are able to update the weight or the information on the discriminators. I assume it takes another 1 unit delays. We also need to train Gs, because training the generator and discriminators is kind of a paired operations in GAN systems. So we need first through the propagations. Noise go through the entire path and reach over here. Okay, the latency is LG plus LP. The cost function of generation actually is different. So here we're trying to fool the system. Okay, discriminator is say okay, any image we trying to judge that correctly, right? And here the goal is to fool the system, say okay, the generated samples can pass the test over here. So the cost function here is different. So we have to redo this and then go through back, updated the weight. So we have entire latency. So as you can see, complete one round of training that the GAN systems is pretty costly in terms of hardware designs and also the latencies. What we proposed here is trying to improve the training or optimize the training. There's several possibilities. One possibility is spatial parallelisms. So in other words, we try to duplicate hardwares. We sacrifice more cost on hardware and then to improve the performance. This is a very general optimization skills in hardware design, right? So what do we do is, as you can see, this path and this path itself is kind of independent. We do not have to separate it. We do not have to, we are able to separate it if we have two discriminators, right? So in this ways, the blue path taking this latency and the black path taking this latency. And if we operate them simultaneously, the longer one will remain, right? So in this ways, we can improve the performance on this path. We also can do computation sharing. What I meant over here is, remember, when we supply the generated samples to train discriminator and generators, they both have to go through the entire path through the generator and the discriminators, but they have different loss functionalities and therefore they have different impact on the weight. So if we only duplicate weight update circuitries, okay, then we can take a similar path over here and then diverse the weight update part into the computation. So again, the blue path versus a red path. The red path is slightly longer than the blue path. Okay. So ReGAN architecture-wise, I'm not so sure. Let me see. I couldn't see it myself. We still having crossbar arrays. Okay. In this designs, we have a memory subarrays, and then we have a full function subarrays. This is taken for the computation function nowadays. We have a buffer subarrays to handle data. So we fetch the data globally from lower level memories to locals in order to get better data supply. So because our previous work was based on the level-based designs, and in this work we changed to spike-based designs with integrated file structures. Okay. Well, application-wise, we fetch the data from memory buffers to memory subarrays to the buffer subarrays, and the buffer subarrays will supply data to the drivers to the computation locally. And the computation results will be sent back to the controllers, and then eventually sent back to the memory arrays. Okay. The goal over here is we implement both generator and decoder on the same set of the hardware to reduce the computation cost. Here is again very rough results. This shows the GAN systems by using different data sets and different array structures. We still, for this case, we still using some smaller data sets because this is very new work. We do not have developed a lot of large data set implementation yet. So for those small set of data, as you can see, compared to GPUs, we trace more than 200 times speed up and a lot of energy savings. It's just a general introduction on RRAM used for the GAN systems. And of course, I didn't include in this work is there's a lot of challenging implementation. Here, what we're trying to do is just improve the hardware efficiency and then make streaming faster, because the GAN streaming is quite costly. But usually GANs is DNNS are pretty large, so we expect it has to distribute to multiple cores. The communications between cores and also the communication between the generator and decoder is a key issue. And this is something we are still working on. Alright, so the last part I'm going to introduce for today's tutorial is FPGA Accelerations. I assume Professor Yuan talked as previously on this part in his tutorial. We have some collaborations on this topic as well. So again, why people tend to use FPGAs? I think the biggest motivation is its lower power consumptions. And also, it's very flexible in the design because of the reconfigurabilities. Okay. And I assume you know that FPGA structure pretty well. And it has a gate, like the lookup tables. So any inputs corresponding to 2 times of the 2 to the power of n trace. And for the logic elements, it's essentially a lookup table with flip-flops. So this is used for the synchronization. And the system-wise, many logic elements will be grouped through the configurable logic blocks. Local routings will be handled over here, right? And even higher level architectures, we have configurable logic blocks, interconnect fabricated routings, connections, I/O blocks, fixed logic blocks like VRAM for local data storage, ESPs for fixed floating multiplier and add and so on and so forth, right? If you talk about the history of the FPGAs, right? Similar as what we have, any semiconductor industry, right? The growth of the size and functionalities supplied by FPGAs increased dramatically in the past years. Well, okay. So when we're talking about again the neural network implementation, so matter is GPU, CPU, FPGA, and so on and so forth. One observation, obviously, is we say, just looking at comparing the AlexNet versus the GoogleNet, okay, the performance requirement or computation requirement increased dramatically, right? The data, meaning the memory access requirement, also increased dramatically. So computation and memory access are always two key factors in FPGA acceleration design implementation. So from computation perspectives, we like to have more computing units. We try to improve or increase the resource utilization. For memory access perspectives, higher bandwidth shall be provided on hardware levels. And when we utilize that, we try to improve the memory efficiency, right? Besides, parallelisms, improve the parallelisms and improve the data coordinations is important in implementation. And I just talked to some students. In recent years, the model reduction is a very hot topic in machine learning societies. We reduce the parameter numbers of neural networks, so it can supply into smaller, for instance, the mobile hardware. Well, what we expect is, again, solely software optimization or solely hardware optimization might not be sufficient on mobile base. Okay, what we expected is for any applications, we have to understand the algorithms, understand the characterisms. Okay, so during the implementations, we need to understand what we have on FPGAs. Is it big board, small board? How much is its memory bandwidth, and so on and so forth. So the implementation or the training of algorithm levels shall pull hardware constraints, and then the implementation the generated configurations will be optimized for this hardware design. So this is essentially applied to all works we have done. So in FPGA implementation sessions, I provide two examples in our work. One is called the language model in neural language processing. Neural language processing shows interaction between computer and human languages. Language models are used to estimate likelihood of phrases, and for example, it can be applied to speech recognition, machine translation, text recognition, and so on and so forth. So what we do, in fact, is more close to the text recognition. For example, for the BSB I mentioned at the beginning of today's tutorial, we're talking about the character recognition, right? So I mentioned character recognition on top levels. We have word confabulations and then sentence confabulations and so on and so forth. This is actually show the overall pictures. So assuming you have some piece of image of the texts, right? For example, we apply the BSB over here, or general character recognition methodologies. So for each characters, we get some candidate characters. Word confabulation is used to get some guesses. The guess could be one word or multiple words as a candidate. And then the sentence confabulations use language models to recover the original sentence over here. So the FPGA example I showed here is for the sentence confabulation. Okay, the concept here and the word confabulation is quite similar. So, what is the language model? For example, if you're doing, English test, right? You say, I saw space dog, what to call over here A versus N, right? I guess easy, or some arbitrary words from the dictionary, okay? So traditionally people use statistics-based language models. So what people do for network or for the statistics analysis is they try to analyze the probability of I saw A dot versus probability of I saw A n dot. So the first one has a higher probability. Then the computer will choose A and fall into the space here. Okay. So how do we calculate the probability of these sentences? Okay, it's first that probability of I and times of the probability of saw follow I, and then the probability of A follow I saw, and so on so forth. And then through completed sentences, they can get the value for this combination, and then you can get value for another combination, and then compare the probabilities. Okay, so this statistics models, okay, the expectation is starting with one set of vocabularies. So every steps, we kind of increase the size of the complexity from V to V squared to V to the power of n. So meaning, if we try to develop the deeper structures, the higher complexity or the algorithm complexity itself will be pretty high. Okay, so a lot of cases we can only handle short-term perspectives of sentences. Meaning, okay, let's handle sequential of 3 words, or a sequence of 4 words, and that's it. Because when we further increase it, the system, the algorithm becomes too complex to be handled. Well, this is for feed-forward networks. It's difficult. So people start thinking about use to RNN recurrent neural network to handle that. So what is the difference of FNN versus RNN? Okay, I show kind of structure. This is input layers, this is hidden layers, and this is output layers. Okay, so feed-forward starting from input to hidden to the output. Okay, if we want to add more layers, we add more layers here. So the network size grows. Okay, for RNNs, the output of the hidden layers from previous timestamp will be sent back and used for calculation of the following timestamp, the t to t plus 1. So you can see this can kind of represent connection to the hidden layer itself. So it's indicating the hidden layer can be used to maintain the information in time domain. So it's record long-term historical information, and of course, for long time back, the impact becomes smaller, and for the newly updated information, the impact is larger. Okay, so because of this kind of historical storage, information storage capabilities, it shows a stronger learning abilities, especially the learnings related to the historical information. Well, the network implementation perspective, the size is very not that big, because we kind of squeeze a large network into compact structures. We work on the training. Not many people work on the training previously. The training, I also show all the equations over here, but what I really want to emphasize is the computation is, again, back propagation through the times. We did quick analysis previously on the hardware cost on different components in ReGAN training. So matrix vector consume majority of the computation resources, 70% and more. Activation functionalities consume 20%, and the remaining is kind of very less. Well, a concept over this is if we are able to partition a large network into different cores, right? And implement on different cores, doing the execution in parallel, then we can improve the performance. So we are also trying to do the exercises. We improve the number of the cores. As you can see at the beginning, it's speed up. But very soon it's getting saturated and doesn't improve very much. Okay. So we try to understand what happens in the training processes. So in those structures, I show, each set shows one time step. This is the input layers to the hidden layers, and this is represent the hidden layer to the output layers. Well, I use the size of the rectangles to represent complexities roughly. So the hidden layer size is very small, but output layer size is huge. So this computation takes less time, complexity, and this takes a higher complexity. Okay, so traditional hardware repetitions, we kind of bother the bottleneck is the output computations. We propose something very simply. We say, okay, why don't we duplicate output layer pieces? And the back propagation timestamp in this case is 4, meaning we have a 4 output layers implementation. One hidden layer implementation can handle and balance the case already. By doing this, the pipeline structure, the speed up compared to the single implementations is 1.07 times, and ours parallel execution is close to 4 times, right? So it's kind of optimized the points. Other than this, FPGA implementation, it's always talking about the data conversions. I kind of believe Dr. Yuan must have talked about this because he has extensive research on the area. So no matter on GPU, CPU, FPGAs, in recent years, popular trend is not using floating point, but change this to the fixed point data. So right now, the new GPU actually already featured this, but our work was done several years back. Also, activation functionalities. As our previous analysis, it consumed more than 20% of the computing powers, right? So if we are able to do some curve fittings, then the cost can be reduced. So architecture-wise, we try to develop the PEs. It's kind of uniform structures. We have several PE optimization structures and plug into this. And then by using those PE pieces, we form the upper layer calculation pieces and hidden layer calculation cores. And then we apply to different cores. So resource utilizations, we use inherent parallelisms. We talk about data format conversation. We also talk about activation function approximations, right? We have this P-based structures. It's the design concept over here is trying to improve the scalabilities. This work was done on combo systems. It has multiple FPGAs. So if we're able to implement on one FPGAs, we can extend it into many different FPGAs. Also, memory efficiency will be handled by the body thread management units. And extensive data reuse have to be considered. I will now talk more details about here. So, memory access optimizations. The training data itself is pretty large, so it has to stay in the hosting memories. But the remaining part, we tend to have the intermediate data, where is it? Store on off-chip memories and stream into on-chip memories. So it's basically related to the data requirement on time. Okay. Okay. This is the P element designs, okay? Because the reason we started on FPGA implementation is we had ARM-based design, and we're trying to use FPGA as an emulator to estimate or predict the efficiency of ARM-based systems. So we created this process element. The concept here is it has a similar expectation input-output as the crossbar cores. So every PE has to be the same. Okay, so that's why we generate the uniform PE structures. And of course, FPGA we couldn't have very efficient multiplication operation. So we kind of use the FEFOs, use pipeline multipliers, but projection over here is to help to understand the estimated potential of ARM-based design. Let me skip this part just to show you some experimental results. Again, we use Convolution systems which have 4 FPGAs. It is a very old system right now. We use Microsoft Research Sentence Completion. Okay, so it has many such kind of tests. I don't know any of you have tried this before. We use 19th and 20th century novels, about 30 mega data size, to train the system. The vocabulary size is 10,000. Of course, it's more than what I have in English. Hidden layer size is 1,000. We have backpropagation timestamp is 4. So, for the methodologies, if randomly put A, B, C, D, E over the accuracy is 20%, right? I can show you the RNN 100. Smooth the 3-gram is the oscilloscope-based language models. It's meaning there's 3 steps in the design, and its accuracy is about 37%. We use RN. This work it reaches 46%. It's still not,还没有及格是吧？ But it's pretty good. So we couldn't compete with the following, this work. This work because it has done some labels on the informations. Of course, it helps to improve the accuracy. And the human, I don't know how they measure the humans. It's probably American people. Yeah. So we majorly focus on the performance and so on and so forth. So random-wise, we compare FPGA's runtime versus CPU. FPGA versus GPU. The skill here is different. CPU is, of course, very slow. GPU is faster. FPGA actually, our FPGA implementation, didn't win the GPUs. But as you can see, the difference is not as significant. That's something I want to mention. Over here, as you can see, the GPU power frequency and CPU power frequency is much higher than what we have on the FPGA board. Memory bandwidth is also a lot smaller on FPGA, right? So this actually shows the backpropagation timestamps. We choose 4 as optimized for this network designs because 8 actually doesn't improve a lot. Well, talking about the memory efficiency. There's one thing I want to emphasize is that, for instance, for the CPU and GPUs, even this runtime is really high, the efficiency is low. So it's kind of use the computing power and memory bandwidth to get high performance. But FPGAs, since we do optimization on hardware levels, so the efficiency is much higher. Similarly, when we talk about the energies, the efficiency is a lot higher. So, quick summarize, this is the FPGA acceleration framework for the RNNs. And we first utilized the FPGAs for RNN training. The work was published on, what's that? 2015. I forgot the conference name, so suddenly I lost that. But okay. We also working on, again, let's go back to the software hardware co-design concepts. We actually, for the Sparse CNNs, it's probably more obvious demonstrations. this figure a little bit more. So this is actually a CNN networks. For convolution layers, previously there's a lot of sparsity work on machine learning communities. So what they're trying to do is to reduce number of parameters. They made metrics, for example, convolution layers, free connect layers, really, really sparse. And then they say, okay, this curve shows this sparsity. You can see it becomes very, very sparse. And they usually machine learning people claim this is the ideal, performance improvement. They're really, really high. Well, we did very stupid work. We follow their work, and then we implement on different CPU and GPU platforms. And we find that, in fact, the speed up is limited, and for many layers, there's no speed up, but performance separation. What is the reason? The reason is algorithm optimization take random sparsity. The random sparsity, if you have any hardware backgrounds, it's created irregular memory accesses for data localities. Then we see that the theoretical speedup doesn't really, generate the practical speedups. So let's look at the CNN with the structure sparsities. This is a regional dense CNN length. L1 norms will, whenever possible, should remove the connections. We propose the cells trying to remove entire rows or columns. So the producer structure is still regularized, and the memory exercises is traceable and controllable. This is what we're trying to do. In Sparse CNN Accelerations, the architecture-wise, we're still trying to, form the architecture with uniform P process elements, and the data is handled by global control units and DNNS running engines. We can bypass this part, but the key over here is this is the general flows. While we're doing the trainings. Let me say, while we're doing, pre-trained CNNs is, you have original CNN before the specifications. But doing the specifications, we need get hardware constraints over here. The information including, for instance, how many PEs you have, how much is your memory bandwidth, and so on and so forth. And those will be used constraints, for example, the memory size, metric size, and the partitions and so on and so forth. And then the tree networks will be supplied to the hardware implementations. And we expect such kind of hardware software co-designs can help improve the efficiency of hardware. And usually it takes several iterations over here. We also trying to improve the sparse kernel compressions. I do not have a lot of time to represent over here, but this represents equal features in RGBs. Conventional filter weight is doing this and this. So during the mappings, we have to play some game to make multiplication, more convenient in those ways. Okay, and since we use cupola cells, right, the compression doesn't have to be column-based or row-based as I previously talked, but simply remove the column and the rows. Here is actually some results to show. Through improved cores, as you can see, sets are row-based compression schemes. It varies. It's hard to predict it. Our scheme is more traceable and kind of more scalable. This page is something I want to emphasize this, okay? This shows storage-oriented or performance-oriented. So this figure, the colors represent the different layers. Dark blue represent convolution layers, and this red or orange related colors represent fully connected layers. So as you can see, the 2.1, for instance, this is kind of a balanced, because fully connect layers contribute the majority of the parameters. Okay, so if your design is memory bounded, you will have to cut off the size of the parameters, and then you have to try to sparse, have a further sparsification on your fully connected layers, like this one do. Well, the convolution layers is more related to the computation resources. So if your design is more computation limited, then you will need to do more efforts to reduce the parameters on convolution layers. So the assumption over here actually is, say, no matter what is the configurations, we try to obtain the similar accuracy on system level. Okay, so you couldn't say, okay, I get the strictly sparsify both fully connected layers and the convolution layers, because then your system performance will be damaged, very much. So it's kind of a trade-off. Depends on your hardware implementation constraints. So yeah, this is the some data. So again, convolution layers, as you can see, the sparsity number couldn't be really low. And the friend convolution layers, since it sustains more detailed features at the beginning, because at the beginning you don't know which feature is important, which is less important. So you have to contain all the information. That's why it's 100%, 80% also first. And features, we probably get more information, and many of them can be cut off. Well, here again it showed comparisons with CPU, GPU, and our implementations. Our time per images is still a little bit bigger than GPUs, but much less than the CPUs. Okay. We also compared to different CNN applications, past years, FPGA conferences. And we got a lot of better performance. Yes, the major win is because we sparse the networks, right? So quick summarize, DNN demonstrate great success and potentials in various types of applications. Mismatch between the software requirement and hardware capability is more severe as problem scale increases. New devices and novel architectures could play a very important role as well. So this is something I have to emphasize in today's talk. I'd like to thank you all for coming here, and also I thank you all for all valuable questions. If you have more questions, feel free to send me an emails, even some detailed experimental details I couldn't answer right away, so I will find my students to get the information. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from the audience? Yes.
Compare with GPU implementation, the technical implementation like lower.
So
do you think will that be the trend, like all the implementation might be dominated by GPU?
Well, I think especially this case. I think it's so I think especially recently I feel that NVIDIA's GPU development is a lot faster than what we can contribute. So I don't think in near term our research can keep up with speed. So especially for the trainings, the GPU is still very, very necessary and critical. But implementation-wise, FPGA can still provide flexibility.
But there's a pseudo theorem that says that GPUs are never better than ASICs, right? Because you can take out something from the GPU that you don't need for neural networks, and you've got yourself a neural network ASIC.
But if your memory is like large enough,
Well, I think the question is anybody going to put the money in designing it, right? GPU design is driven by several large markets. Now, neural networks are turning out to be pretty big markets too, right? But given the huge cost of designing the chip.
what if you like low power GPU mobile?
But they have a lot fewer multipliers and memory systems simpler, right? So I don't think that's the answer. But you know, already you see NVIDIA moving toward putting in some things that are more tuned towards CNN. They took one of their designs, took out some stuff, right? It's all just that might be the way to get to a real, you know, fairly flexible but specialized method.
Page 24.
On page 24. As you said, the figure shows. It seems that, well, your Prof number has some variation under. Is that a concern, or is that a problem in your design?
So this number, I mean the x-axis is both based on the G and also the input, right? So what I meant is even the same number over here, it's indicate a lot of variations in a lot of different combinations in communication. So this variation, the reason I put it on is it's expected. It's not very big, but we do see the difference over here, the variation over here. It cannot be completely bypassed based on our analysis. Okay, so. But see, this is only one bit difference over here. And in fact, we use the curve for training and then apply this back. As far as our output have a sufficient number of pauses, general cases, that's still pretty good. In fact, our collaborator, UMass, shows for two-level memristor, two-level memristors for honest recognitions, the accuracy could be like 95–96%, very close to the theoretical analysis. Even considering the situation. Yeah.
This is because you're taking out the point, so these variation will be average out.
Yes. Yeah. So we actually use the curve. For instance, we target 50 nanoseconds, for instance, and we use this curve for these equations to do the trainings.
Okay. So any more questions? Hello, Professor. One question about the rescue. Rescue the debate. I think it's the page 39. Yes, thank you. Conceptually, we know through the training we can rescue the certain amount of the neural to be retraining. We can make the correct output pretty high. But relatively, how much neural we train What I mean is the previous slide shows some are stack start with and some are programmable with before retraining and after retraining. So we sorry, 38. The dark blue and the light blue, we retrain those neurons. So relatively, how many neurons will we retrain to be enough?
We do not retrain the neurons, we train the entire weight matrix. So the entire weight matrix will be retrained. But I think what you okay. So related understanding in fact is your network has to be sufficient large. For example, your network already very small, and it's barely recognize those images. And then if you have defects, retrain might not be able to recover that because the capacity of the network is not sufficient. But if your network is reasonably large, meaning it has the capacities, then you're able to recover that. I have to go back to check what the other configurations on the network. But if you like, you can look at our paper and shall have the configuration. This work actually do have sufficient size. That's why even for 20% of the defects, we are able to recover that. But the training itself is that new set of the weight. So imagine I have two designs. This design, based on the Markov method defect map, I do the retrain. Then the weight matrix map on this design will be different for another design. Okay.
Okay, I think we should let Professor Lee to have a rest. Since he came here, she gave the talk, and during the lunch break, every professor asks questions, and she continued to talk this afternoon, and for 30-minute coffee break, she stood there for questions. Okay, so I think we should give her a break.
Thank you. I think it's very great pleasure to have so many questions and very valuable discussions as well. And I'm also very glad to see many people are interested in our work. Thank you very much. Okay,
so to show our appreciation, we prepared a small gift for you. Okay, so I think it closes our short course this week, and thank you for attending the wonderful courses. Okay, from Monday, Professor Wu, from Monday through Friday, okay, and the next talk is also very, very good. Okay, so thank you for coming, and please fill out the questionnaire and give us to let us have a better workshop in the future.